All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling what is, hands down, the most intense, passionate, and heavily watched rivalry in the entire history of club football. We're talking about El Clasico, Real Madrid versus FC Barcelona. But as we're going to see today, this isn't just a football match. It's a total clash of identities, a war of philosophies, and a literal arms race that shaped the modern sporting world.
So let's just dive right in with a number that's honestly going to shock you. 11-1. That was the actual final score in favor of Real Madrid during the 1943 Copa del Rey semifinal. Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does a match between two relatively equal giants end in an 11-1 blowout? Well, history tells us this rivalry goes way beyond the pitch. Reportedly, right before that match, Barcelona players were visited and threatened by state security forces. It's a pretty stark reminder that to really get El Clasico, we have to look way outside the white lines. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to trace the roots of the rivalry, look at the epic battles for the sport's biggest stars, dig into some wild betrayals and controversies, break down the legendary Messi versus Ronaldo era, and finally, look at today's billion-euro stadium arms race. Let's get to it. Part 1. The roots of the rivalry, covering politics, power, and the early years. To really grasp the intensity here, we have to travel all the way back to the early 20th century, a time when football quickly became totally entangled with Spain's complex national identity. You can clearly see the historical divide drawn right here. Real Madrid, being based in the capital city, organically grew to be identified with Spanish unionism and the centralizing power of the national government. On the flip side, Barcelona, the capital of Catalonia, evolved into this powerful symbol of Catalan identity and resistance. Because regional languages and identities were often, frowned upon or actively restrained by the central government back then, FC Barcelona adopted their famous motto, Més que un club, which means more than a club. Supporting either team essentially became a way to align with completely opposing political and cultural ideologies. Looking at this timeline, you can literally see how this builds into real-world conflict. The first unofficial match happened way back in 1902, but things took a really dark turn during the Spanish Civil War and Francisco Franco's dictatorship. In 1936, Barcelona's president, Josep Sunyol, was arrested and executed without trial by Franco's troops. Then, by 1939, the regime actually forced Barcelona to Hispanize its name to strip away its Catalan flair. It just brilliantly illustrates the extreme tension that led directly to that bizarre 11-1 match in 1943 we just talked about. Football had essentially become a proxy war for political dominance. Moving into Part 2, the battles for the stars, specifically focusing on Di Stefano and Cruyff. As we roll into the mid-20th century, that deep ideological friction morphed into a fierce, incredibly high-stakes tug-of-war on the transfer market. Both clubs were absolutely desperate to sign the world's greatest players to prove their superiority. And that brings us to what is arguably one of the most pivotal moments in football history, the Alfredo Di Stefano saga in the 1950s. Di Stefano was an absolute generational talent. Initially, it really looked like Barcelona had secured his signature, but then a massive dispute over his player rights popped up with the Colombian club Millonarios. Real Madrid saw an opening, aggressively intervened, and ultimately snatched Di Stefano for the Spanish capital. He went on to build an absolute dynasty in Madrid, a move that completely flipped the balance of power in Spanish football for decades. But of course, Barcelona eventually fired back. In 1973, they signed the brilliant Johan Cruyff for a world record fee. And Cruyff didn't just bring raw talent, the guy brought a revolution. As a player and later as a manager, he birthed Barcelona's tiki-taka philosophy, this highly artistic, possession-based style of play. This set up such a fascinating contrast against Real Madrid's more realistic, result-driven, pragmatic style. El Clasico was no longer just about politics. It had become a literal clash of footballing philosophies, pure art versus strict discipline. Which brings us to Part 3, betrayals and controversies, highlighted by the infamous Figo incident. Because when passion runs this deep, it occasionally crosses the line. As we hit the turn of the millennium, this rivalry became defined by some bitter, incredibly personal betrayals. Just listen to this quote from July 2000. "I want to assure them that Luis Figo will with absolute certainty be at the Camp Nou on the 24th. I'm not so mad as to do a thing like that." Figo was Barcelona's vice-captain, an absolute hero in Catalonia. He said this directly to the media.
But, right behind the scenes, Real Madrid's presidential candidate Florentino Perez had engineered a secret pre-contract. So shortly after dropping this quote, Figo broke his promise, triggering a world record $180 million transfer straight to Real Madrid. I mean, the dramatic irony here is just staggering.
So the crazy part is what happened when Figo actually returned to Barcelona wearing a white Madrid shirt. It was absolute vitriol. The crowd greeted him with massive banners reading Judas, Scum, and Mercenary. Fans even printed thousands of fake 10,000 peseta notes with his face on them. And when Figo jogged over to take a corner kick, he was met with a terrifying shower of coins, lighters, mobile phones, and, famously, a severed pig's head, literally thrown right onto the pitch. To this day, it remains the most chaotic and iconic image of betrayal in the history of the sport.
Part 4. Messi versus Ronaldo and the statistical peak of the rivalry. Following the absolute chaos of the Figo era, El Clasico entered what is undeniably its golden age. In the 2010s, two absolute legends took this from a fierce national derby into a massive global spectacle.
When you break down the raw data from 2009 to 2018, the exact years Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo faced off directly, it is genuinely mind-blowing. They played exactly 30 El Clasico matches against each other. In those games, Messi scored 20 goals while Ronaldo scored 18. Amazingly, both were absolutely flawless from the penalty spot, 100% success rate. But take a look at that final column. During their direct overlap, Messi's Barcelona had a massive edge in winning the actual matches, taking 46% of the games compared to Ronaldo's 26%. These two pushed each other to unimaginable heights, transforming El Clasico into the most-watched club game on Earth.
And that leads us to our final chapter, Part 5, the billion-euro stadiums and the 2026 corporate arms race. Fast forward to today, February 2026. The war isn't just about who's running around on the grass anymore. It's about the glass, the steel, and the absolute architectural dominance of their stadiums.
Both clubs have just wrapped up the most expensive stadium projects in history, and they took completely opposite approaches. Real Madrid turned the Santiago Bernabeu into a shape-shifting, enclosed metallic spaceship, kind of like Iron Man tech. It literally has a 30-meter-deep underground cave called the Hypogeum where they slice up the grass and stack it like lasagna trays so the stadium can host huge concerts without ruining the pitch. On the flip side, Barcelona's Spotify Camp Nou is all about massive Mediterranean scale. It's an open-air structure with 3 massive sweeping terraces that feels like a 21st-century Roman Colosseum. This goes way beyond a football club rivalry now. It's a direct reflection of how the global live event industry is transforming for you, the consumer.
And their capacities brilliantly illustrate these differing business strategies. Madrid intentionally capped their stadium at roughly 81,000 seats. Why? Well, because they're focusing on high-yield luxury. They want fewer people paying top euro for crazy VIP experiences like their exclusive in-stadium skybar. Barcelona, though, they want for sheer domination. The Camp Nou holds a staggering 105,000 fans. Plus, their new tensioned roof is specifically designed to bounce the acoustics right back down to the pitch, creating this terrifying wall of sound meant to just completely overwhelm the opposition.
But as you can imagine, building these modern marvels means the financial stakes are absolutely terrifying. Real Madrid's total projected debt for their renovation is sitting around 1.17 billion euros. Barcelona, who took on massive loans, is looking at a cost of roughly 1.45 billion euros. Think about that for a second. Both of these clubs have essentially bet their entire 21st century legacies and frankly their financial survival on these mega projects. If the fans stop showing up, these incredible buildings just become billion-euro white elephants.
So, who's actually winning the financial battle? Well, right now, Madrid's high-tech approach seems to be paying off because the Bernabeu can hide its pitch and host events 365 days a year. We're talking everything from NFL games to massive pop concerts. It's expected to generate 400 million euros annually. It's basically a certified cash machine. Barcelona, because they rely a bit more heavily on matchday attendance and sheer scale, projects slightly less at about 350 million euros a year. So, it's pretty incredible, right? This rivalry has evolved from a regional political dispute into a battle over global footballing philosophy, and now into a billion-euro corporate arms race. They really are the yin and yang of world football. Which leaves me with one final question for you. If you could only watch one El Clasico in person, do you choose the enclosed, high-tech masterpiece of engineering in Madrid or the roaring, massive cathedral of sport in Barcelona? Think about it.
Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep that curiosity alive.